In 1923, an old bush prospector named Bill McKeever stood watching attentively at the edge of a small Panamanian airport. A small 4-passenger monoplane taxied to a halt, and its lone pilot climbed out, secured the wheels, and strode confidently across the runway. McKeever walked forward to meet him. "Are you Jimmy Angel?" he asked. The pilot nodded. Just 10 minutes later, the two men were sitting across from each other in the dining room of a nearby hotel. As they sipped cool drinks, McKeever introduced himself as a mining engineer and explained why he had sought Angel out. McKeever had heard plenty about Jimmy Angel, the legendary bush pilot, and he had been impressed by what he'd learned. According to his sources, James Crawford Angel had begun flying at just 15. By age 16, he had bluffed his way into the Canadian Air Corps, and at 18, he was mustered out of the British Royal Flying Corps after shooting down 3 German planes and 5 observation balloons during World War I. After his wartime exploits, Angel went on to become an instructor for the Air Force of Sun Yat-sen, president of the Southern Chinese Republic. Later, he flew mail routes over the perilous mountains of Mexico. In 1930, he headed to Hollywood to pilot bombers for the movie Hell's Angels, the famous aerial war epic. Sitting there face to face, McKeever had little doubt that Angel's reputation was genuine. He quickly got to the point. First of all, he began, "Let me make this clear. What I'm about to tell you, and anything we might do, must remain absolutely confidential, just between us." The word secret caught Angel's interest immediately. He leaned forward, intrigued. McKeever explained that he wanted Angel to fly him, along with the necessary equipment, from Panama City to Ciudad Bolivar, a settlement along Venezuela's Orinoco River. From there, he planned to venture into the area known as the Lost World. Angel didn't flinch. Most pilots regarded the so-called Lost World with a mix of superstition and dread, preferring to detour miles out of their way to avoid it. Tales circulated about strange creatures, ancient remnants from a prehistoric era that supposedly still roamed there. More than one pilot had vanished amid showers of spears hurled by unseen attackers. Another story insisted that the region was inhabited solely by cannibalistic tribes who killed and ate outsiders in bizarre ritualistic ceremonies, although some claimed those tribes were actually of European descent themselves. To Angel, however, these were little more than wild legends. He knew the area's fame as the inspiration for W.H. Hudson's novel Green Mansions and for Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's adventure The Lost World, which had given the region its evocative nickname. And the stories weren't surprising. The place was full of extraordinary natural wonders. In the Orinoco Basin, for example, the river flowed in 2 directions at once. When Sir Robert Herman Schomburg had climbed Mount Roraima, he discovered a vast plateau teeming with plants and animals unlike anything then known to science. Angel was quickly convinced. "Well, what are we waiting for?" he said, grabbing his hat. A week later, the 2 men were flying toward Venezuela. At Ciudad Bolivar, they stopped to refuel, load supplies, and then took off again. Soon, their little plane soared high over the Guiana highlands, a wild green expanse occasionally broken by sheer outcrops of rock. McKeever refused to provide Angel with a map. Instead, he guided him by pointing out landmarks with his thumb, watching for familiar features, and taking compass readings. But as they crossed the broad grassy basin of the Orinoco Llanos, the magnetic compass began to spin wildly and wouldn't work properly. "It's iron," McKeever explained. "Those hills down there are loaded with it." Heading south, they soon rose above the dense jungle into a region of 1,000-foot mesas cut through with rushing streams. Suddenly, McKeever pointed excitedly. "There!" he shouted. "Can you set her down there?" Angel studied the flat tableland below. There wasn't much room, but it would have to do. He made a pass, banked the plane, and brought it in for a short, precise landing. Later, Angel would recall that mountain was a rough place to land. There was a downdraft of about 1,000 feet per minute, but I put us down right where McKeever told me to, next to a little stream. In 3 days, we dug 75 pounds of gold out of the gravel. We could have taken more, but I was worried about overloading the plane. Takeoff was going to be tough. He continued, I had to run right to the edge and practically nosedive into the canyon, which was over 5,000 feet deep. But I made it, and we flew straight onto Panama. We put the gold in a bank vault, and I got my $5,000. According to McKracken, there was even more treasure hidden there. He estimated as much as 30,000 carats in diamonds from that same place. He suggested they form a partnership. "You fly 'em, I'll find 'em," he said, "and we'll both get rich." Angel agreed and began looking into how to file a legal claim on the area. "What will we call the place?" he asked McKracken. The old prospector had been secretive about many things, but he did have an answer for that. "Just call it what the Injuns call it," he laughed. "Call it Devil's Mountain." "Devil's Mountain," Angel repeated. "That's an odd name." McKracken nodded. "The Camaracoto Indians call it Ollantaytambo. That means Devil's Mountain. They're terrified of it. Whenever there's a big thunderstorm swirling around that 10,000-foot peak, with lightning flashing all around, they run for the jungle and hide. They're sure the devil himself lives up there. Maybe he does." Not long after, McKracken disappeared. Angel later learned that his would-be partner had returned to the United States for surgery. When he checked on the report, he was saddened to find out that the old man, so secretive that he'd hidden his illness, had died. For a while, Jimmy Angel went back to his usual work. But he couldn't forget the fortune in gold and diamonds McKracken had described. Determined to find it himself, Angel returned to Venezuela. He piloted an all-metal, 8-passenger monoplane, which he had named Rio Caroni after the Venezuelan river, and began making flights out of Ciudad Bolivar, methodically scouting every flat-topped mesa in the region. Soon, though, Angel's search started to get expensive. Aviation fuel didn't come cheap, and after a while, the cost was impossible to ignore. To keep going, he moved deeper into the jungle, built a camp, and cleared his own landing strip. At least this way, he reasoned, he would be closer to his goal. 6 years went by. During that time, he made countless flights over the endless green wilderness, but he never managed to relocate the one mesa he was searching for. Then, one spring day in 1934, Jimmy Angel, bush pilot, treasure hunter, and soldier of fortune, flew into history. He had taken off early that morning and was soon cruising over the same jungle canopy that looked, from above, exactly like every other jungle canopy. By noon, he hadn't spotted any landmarks to indicate he was near the treasure site. He was about to turn back to camp for a meal of cold beans when he noticed something strange. His compass began to spin and point straight down. Looking out the window, he spotted what appeared to be the iron-studded hills McKracken had pointed out years earlier. Angel dropped the plane closer to the treetops. As he flew, he started recognizing details in the landscape, peculiarities he remembered from that flight with McKracken in 1923. At last, it seemed, he was on the right track. Below him, the Rio Caroni, the river that gave his plane its name, threaded across the green floor like a silver ribbon. Soon, he saw a sprawling mountain mesa he thought he recognized. If his calculations were correct, he was getting close to the treasure site. Flying around a promontory, he suddenly spotted a V-shaped canyon cut into the face of a towering mountain. He was sure this must be Devil's Mountain, but he didn't recall any such canyon from before. As he drew nearer, he began to wonder, had he approached from the opposite side last time, flying in over the mesa instead of the north face? The canyon was deep and crooked, and a stream surged from it, its waters strangely pink. Intrigued, Angel banked the plane, dropped altitude, and flew into the canyon's mouth. The place was enormous. As he flew along, the plane's engine noise echoed back and forth between the canyon walls. Then he began to hear another sound, a deep roar that grew louder and louder until it drowned out the engine entirely. Rounding a bend, Angel saw the most astonishing sight of his life. Ahead of him thundered a colossal waterfall. A massive torrent of water plunged straight down, seemingly from the clouds themselves. The great white column vanished into a boiling mass of spray far below on the valley floor. Angel circled the falls several times, trying to estimate their width, which he judged to be about 500 feet. He swooped low over the valley floor and then climbed. glancing at his altimeter to make a rough calculation of the fall's height. He estimated it at nearly 3/4 of a mile. There was no doubt this was the granddaddy of all waterfalls. He forgot about searching for gold and returned to Ciudad Bolivar to report what he'd seen. Angel was right. If his account was accurate, he had discovered the tallest waterfall on Earth. In Caracas, 2 men took note of the news: Gustavo Cheney, a veteran mountain climber, and Felix Cardona, a Spanish explorer. In 1937, both men, though still strangers to each other, organized separate expeditions to explore the waterfall and the mesa around it. They confirmed the discovery. Unlike ordinary waterfalls where a surface stream spills over a cliff, this fall was the exit point of a huge underground river that burst from an enormous tunnel about 200 feet below the top of the mesa. From what the explorers could tell, the plateau that fed the waterfall was only about 15 by 22 miles in size. Yet somehow, this small area produced an immense volume of water that poured endlessly over the precipice. Puzzled by this mystery, both men made their way to Jimmy Angel's jungle base camp, hoping he could help them find answers. At the base camp, the 2 explorers met Jimmy Angel. Together, they planned a direct assault on the mesa's cliffs. Cheney and Cardona would attempt to see if the mesa could be climbed on foot, while Angel would fly overhead, dropping food, equipment, and medical supplies as needed. The expedition made it up to 4,000 feet before they were forced to stop. From that point on, progress was impossible. The soft Cambrian sandstone had been carved by centuries of erosion into bizarre formations. Deep fissures, some plunging 200 feet, and jagged ridges turned further, climbing into a nightmare. Reluctantly, the men turned back, but they had found the answer to one great mystery: the source of the waterfall's endless torrent of water. Lying directly in the path of the Caribbean trade winds, the mesa acted as an immense natural condenser. Warm air rose constantly from the sweltering jungle below. When this air met the cool winds sweeping in from the sea, a thick mist formed and hung in the air. The area received an estimated 300 inches of rainfall a year, quite possibly making it the wettest place on Earth. The fissured mesa collected this endless precipitation and funneled it underground, feeding the mighty river that thundered over the cliff. Pleased to have solved this riddle, but determined not to give up the quest, Cheney and Cardona began scanning the mesa top through powerful binoculars. At last, they spotted a small, level clearing near the mouth of the waterfall. Could Angel land his plane there? Jimmy circled the spot several times. Maybe he could, maybe he couldn't. But being Jimmy Angel, he was willing to try. According to the plan, Angel and Cheney would attempt the landing, while Cardona remained at base camp to operate the radio, their only link to the outside world. But there was an unexpected passenger Jimmy couldn't leave behind. His wife Marie had come along on his last supply run, and she delivered an ultimatum familiar to every bushman. "You're not going without me." Reluctantly, he agreed. The big day came. The flight from camp to the mesa was uneventful. As they approached the clearing, Angel felt confident. But as he touched down, the plane's wheels began to skid across the thick grass. Water flew in all directions. The aircraft slid uncontrollably and finally nosed over into a shallow pool. Angel climbed out to face what he already suspected. The lush grass had hidden a wet, swampy surface. The plane was mired to its hubs. Worse still, the impact had ruptured the engine. Oil had drained away, and any hope of taking off again was lost. They assessed their position. Perhaps they could hike to the waterfall, but both radio sets were now useless. Their only choice was to abandon the plane, leave behind most of their supplies, and try to return to camp on foot. Angel radioed Cardona to report their predicament. Sensing how dangerous the situation was, Cardona immediately broadcast a plea for help. Several American businessmen in Caracas responded. They quickly chartered a plane to begin the search. The Venezuelan army joined in, sending a military aircraft as well. For nearly 2 weeks, the search planes flew back and forth over the vast ridges of the mountain. But to everyone's alarm, they saw no trace of the party. Just when hope had almost vanished, the 2 men finally stumbled into camp, supporting Marie between them. Their food was gone, their boots were shredded, and their clothes were in tatters, Cuts and bruises covered their bodies, but somehow they had survived 11 days of jungle ordeal. By then, Angel was done with Devil's Mountain. He and Marie soon packed up and left Venezuela behind. Years later, on May 16, 1956, Jimmy Angel died of a stroke in Panama City after a minor plane accident. He never received any financial reward for his adventures on Devil's Mountain, but the magnificent 3,212-foot waterfall he discovered was named Angel Falls in his honor. Perhaps that was reward enough. His name forever etched on the maps of Venezuela. Today, beneath the shadow of the world's tallest waterfall, Jimmy Angel's lost treasure, his rumored hoard of gold and diamonds, still waits for some intrepid, fortune-favored adventurer to come along and claim it. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to read the original article or purchase the magazine from which it was taken, please check out our website, truetalesofburiedtreasure.com.